So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be here and for the support of the board and our staff and students, and thankful to share some of our outcomes with you as well. Sam and Brooke and Amanda all know the work that goes into pulling these stats together, and it's a lot of work. It's not overly exciting work, but it's really important for us to be able to look at the outcomes and show the really important work that we're doing. So I'm pleased to say that in the past year, so our fiscal year is the end of the beginning of May until the end of April, we provided support to 335 clients. We provided 4,132 trauma specialized therapy sessions. That is our mandate, is providing trauma specialized therapy. We did something a little bit different this year, which impacted our demographic information a little bit, in that we were doing single session drop-ins in shelters. And there was a lot of concern from some people about, oh, can you do trauma processing in a single session? And I said, absolutely. In fact, I work with a lot of people in remote Indigenous communities that are flying in even maybe once a month, right? And doing this work. And it's really, really powerful. And because we're processing from start to finish, a single processing, there's a lot that can be done. Now, it's not going to generalize to the other stuff. So it may not, depending on how the neurons fire together and wire together. But what's really cool is we, in these shelter situations, we're providing this kind of drop-in service. And a lot of people, in spite of the overwhelm they're experiencing in their lives, came back and came back again and came back again. So that's really, really exciting to see. Because we focus on just the processing, we don't get the same intake information that we generally do with our typical intake process, because we're just trying to maximize the time that we have with them, knowing that we might not actually have them for a second or a third or a fourth session. So that doesn't quite factor in here as well as it should. And working on rectifying that moving forward. So our mandate is to make trauma specialized therapy accessible to clients that would not otherwise be able to afford it. We provide support specifically to individuals who have an income under 60,000 to make that available. And as you can see here, the majority of our clients are actually living well beneath the low income cutoff line. And even more so when you factor in children and the family and a lot of single parents. When we look at the payment, which is geared to income, but we also don't turn anybody away based on an inability to pay for sessions. The majority of our clients are paying $10 or less per session. Now, I do want to underscore that at this point in time, we're not government funded. So we're only able to do this through the generosity of the grants that we've received, and largely through intensively training students in our treatment model, which has allowed us to have a pretty significant reach. We are shifting away from that for a little while to focus on building up our staff and building up our programs, and to give a more accurate representation of the service we can actually provide with the funding that we truly have. But we wouldn't be able to do the work that we do without the students that we've had in placement. So that's really important to note as well. We service clients all across the region. However, we are primarily based in St. Catharines. So the majority of the clients that we support are in St. Catharines. However, we have expanded into community locations in Welland, briefly, we've just recently expanded into Welland, but in Niagara Falls, Beamsville, and then, like I said, in community settings in St. Catharines over the past year. So that's been really great to see the participation in that as well. And the goal with that is really trying to reduce barriers. So working with the most in need, typically individuals in shelter settings that we find when they're not permanently housed, it's really hard to get to an office for a scheduled appointment because there are just bigger priorities and stressors that are happening. So by being on site in collaboration with community service partners, it's allowed us to make services more accessible and reduce barriers, which has been really wonderful. The age demographic, you can see we support all ages. We've had some little ones and some more senior individuals, but our primary population is 20s, 30s, 40s. Right? So I think it's great that we have people seeking support earlier on as young adults. I think that there's needs on both ends of the spectrum that could also be addressed through some targeted programming, but those are future treatment goals, certainly as well. And then predominantly our population are individuals who identify as females. However, we're seeing a shift in that as well. More male participants and more individuals who identify as non-binary or other. So when we look at the referral source, our referral sources are pretty broad. I've put 2 images up here only because I couldn't quite get the pie graph to show everything. And I also wanted to show you that our largest referral source is self-referral. So although we get a lot of community referrals, the bulk of the referrals that come in are people initiating services for themselves, which is great. There's word of mouth, there's awareness, but we also have a very large representation of referrals from community agencies such as Quest, Niagara Falls Community Health Center, doctors, psychiatrists, shelters regularly refer to us, Canadian Mental Health Association, and hospital services. So there's quite a wide, sometimes police as well, the Aboriginal Health Center, and we get a lot of referrals from other counselors in the community as well that recognize that we provide a bit of a niche service, and it's beneficial for their clients. So we're grateful for those collaborations and for the referrals, because again, that helps us to have that reach. Awareness. And it's not uncommon, by the way, and I think this is a testament to the work that our therapists do. It's not uncommon that when people come to us, they've said, you've been recommended to me by several different people. So it's not that, you know, one person is kind of saying this is where you should be. They're hearing this from multiple people, which is, I think, a really good sign, given that we only opened in 2019 officially as a nonprofit, and we're a very small organization. We currently have 1 full-time, well, now 2 full-time counselor positions. So we're small, again, small but mighty. I'd like to just highlight a little bit about the adverse childhood experiences demographics. So when we talk about working with trauma, one of the things that we know is that there's a direct correlation between our early life childhood experiences and our later life health outcomes, whether it's mental health, physical health, you know, stroke, heart disease, diabetes. The leading killers in life actually directly link up to those early life and early childhood experiences. And when we look at this, what we see is there are some clients that we have that don't report any trauma, which is uncommon, but it happens. And certainly it's self-report information. So some people are not comfortable reporting on that in an initial intake package. But we also have a lot of clients who, you know, have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 or more, right? Well, there's no more than 10, but greater than what a lot of the research looks at is, you know, having 4 adverse childhood experiences. And we know that the risk goes up depending on how many adverse experiences that we have. So, sorry, somebody's in the waiting room. Dana's yeah, so I think that's really important to recognize, because like I said, there is a direct relationship between those later life health outcomes. And when we look at what specifically our clients have experienced, and again, this is self-reported, so it doesn't, you know, not everybody fills this out. It's, I would say, probably an underrepresentation of the true kind of profile of our clients, but it gives a good picture. These are childhood experiences. So consistently, childhood emotional abuse is the highest rated and highest reported trauma. And I really want to highlight that when we look at emotional abuse, it is the form of abuse that has the greatest effect on the brain globally out of all of the forms of abuse. So it's not to say the other aren't impactful, but there's that old adage, sticks and stones may break my bones, words will never hurt me. And that just couldn't be further from the truth. When we look globally at the impact on the brain, we know emotional abuse is actually the most detrimental globally. Feeling unloved by caregivers, that's attachment trauma. That is probably the most prevalent trauma and pervasive trauma that we work with at our center. We are born primed for connection, attachment, attunement. We need it to survive. It grows our brain. It builds our nervous system. It builds the templates that we use to relate to others in the world around us. And our brain is going through its most massive period of human brain growth and development in our first year of life. First 5 years are really important. First year of life is the most massive period of human brain growth and development we have in our entire life. And 5/6 of that is built by our interactions with our caregivers. Are we picked up? Are we robbed? Are we held? Does somebody lovingly look into our eyes, right? That's growing our brain and our nervous system and preparing us to adapt to the world around us. So parents with mental health concerns, neglect, physical abuse, exposure to domestic violence, parental alcohol or drug abuse, child sexual abuse, right? And this is occurring at rates much higher than what we would see in the general population, right? And so, and it gets even higher still. We're going to do a little presentation later looking at the connection between adverse childhood experiences and addictions. And what you will see with those stats is they're even higher, right? Because people don't just grow up and struggle with addictions. There's pain that's underlying. Parental separation and divorce and parental incarceration are part of the adverse childhood experiences questionnaire, but they're not something we track on our intake. So those aren't accurate numbers because we don't ask it of everybody. It's just noted down if somebody has indicated that on their intake, and we are looking to change that. But what I'd like to highlight is the parallel between the adverse childhood experiences and the experiences that a lot of our clients are reporting in present day. And in present day, what you see is similarly, emotional abuse is the highest reported. The majority of our clients, over half of our clients, report suicide ideation. And here's the hopeful piece: when they start working with us, generally within 5 to 6 sessions, we're seeing that coming down. People are no longer reporting suicide ideation when they complete treatment. So this is so, so important because it gives hope, right? Physical abuse, mental illness, sexual assault, domestic violence, job loss is also really significant. Substance use, criminal behavior, and miscarriage. And that's a big one because Niagara region actually has a higher rate of miscarriage than other provinces as well. So something to be mindful of. When we look at our clinical data, this is really hopeful as well. We see clinically and statistically significant reductions in all areas. This is looking at individuals who have completed 3 measures. And I'm going to borrow your report, Gail, for a second, because I didn't print a copy for myself, but I'll cheat off of this for a moment so I can highlight the reductions because they're pretty exciting and I don't have them memorized. So let me for a second. Whoops, sorry. So when we look at our outcome measures, we do a battery of pre, mid, post, and ongoing treatment measures. This particular measure is looking at a variety of subscales, 16 to be precise, and it's tracking changes in those subscales. When people started with us, they were at what's considered to be a clinical level in all of the subscales. At completion of treatment, they were in the normative range, so no longer clinically significant or problematic. They were either problematic or clinically significant. I think there were three subgroups they were problematic in, and the rest were all at the clinically significant level. So when we track outcomes, we see actually a 10-point decrease in anxiety, an 11-point decrease in depression, a 12-point decrease in suicidality, an 11.83 decrease in trauma. Tension reduction behavior, there's an 18.41 reduction. So that would be things like our self-harm, but also addictions. Tension reduction is what is reducing the tension and the pain that I'm feeling. So anything that's kind of taking that away, that's our biggest shift actually, is in the tension reduction. Externalizing behaviors, so things like anger and conduct, we see a 14-point reduction. And like I said, at the beginning, the average pre-scale was problematic for anger, sexual dysfunction, insecure attachment, and the average pre-measure score was clinically elevated for 13 of the 16 subscales in trauma, self-externalizing behavior, anxiety, depression, defensive avoidance, intrusive experiences, dissociation, and somatics, as well as suicidality, impaired self-reference, and tension reduction behavior, and normative at the completion of treatment. So again, this speaks to the efficacy of our treatment model, the approach that we use. You'll get to hear from some of our therapists a little bit later. And, you know, it really is an honor to do the work that we do and to see the gains that we see. This is a snapshot of PCL5. So this is a trauma measure for post-traumatic stress, indicative of post-traumatic stress. And what they suggest is a reduction of 5 points is a threshold for determining whether an individual has benefited from treatment. 10 points is a minimum threshold for it being clinically meaningful and for anticipating that the change will stick. We have, I believe, 29 point or 29 point reduction, 21 point reduction, over 20 points, which is really exciting as well. And again, showing the efficacy of what we're doing. So, and the rest is I'm going to pick up after it's our presentation on the addictions of trauma. But any questions about any of those pieces? See why putting this together is so important. Thanks for your help. I really appreciate your help. It's not a fun job, but it's cool in the outcomes. Any questions?
Now, you quickly said to Jenny that you were going to be hearing about the connection between trauma and addiction. So
You want me to look at, there's a lot more, but I can even just look at the slide.
just so
It
give you
talks
a touch before you have to leave.
Yeah,
Okay.
so my presentation really gets into the neurobiology of addiction and trauma and kind of that's my area. But when we look even at the self-report experiences, you just see that there's similar profiles just occurring at a greater prevalence, right? So sexual abuse, for example, is much higher with our population that's reporting. Everything is higher. But sexual abuse is markedly higher. And again, I don't think that's surprising, right? When we look at the impact that this has on our brain, our body, our nervous system, our sense of self, our view of ourselves and the world around us, it makes really good sense that we see those relationships. But again, the piece that I really hope you take away, going back to those clinical outcomes, is healing is possible, right? And there is hope. So we get a lot of people that come to us just debilitated by their trauma and they want to die because they feel like that's the only option they have. They have this tremendous pain. They feel like they need to use or cut or binge or purge or whatever it is. And really, if we can treat the pain, and that's what we do really well, we focus on treating the trauma, then we can see a reduction in those other areas and quality of life drastically improves. And we see people going back to work or going to school or, engaging in meaningful relationships in a way that they just didn't have the capacity to do before, which is, I think, really, really powerful. And it's such an honor to do what we do. So